Tess Ritchie was born on November 30th, 1994. The youngest in a family of 5 girls, Ritchie was raised in North Bay before moving to Toronto at 19. One of her sisters, Verena Ritchie, said Tess loved her life, her dogs, and her family. Tess had served tables in the city, but her dream was to land a job as a flight attendant and see the world. She was taking steps to do just that, having completed the flight attendant course at Seneca College in North Toronto. At the same time, she was trying to get a job in one of the major hotels in Toronto. Unfortunately, Tess couldn't find a job to her liking. Her family financially supported her and never refused money when she asked for help. Some Canadian sources also say that when Tess didn't get a job at an airline or a hotel, she started learning Italian and searching for au pair jobs in Italy through the internet. Tess also had her own YouTube channel. The last video she published there was on February 23, 2014, almost 4 years before the events we'll discuss today. Tess talked about her experiences and the difficulties she had to face. Let's listen to some excerpts from this video. Unfortunately, a few years after recording this video, Tess again faced problems in her personal life. That fall, heartache destroyed her life. On November 23, 2017, Tess went through an emotional breakup with her boyfriend Julian. The next day she turned to her older sister Rachel, who was 8 years older than her. The two were close. "She was my soulmate," Rachel said. On November 24th, Tess spent most of the day at Rachel's house in Toronto. They talked about the breakup, went shopping, and visited a dog park. That evening, Rachel cooked some food. However, she had to persuade her sister to eat, as she had no appetite due to stress. Despite this, Tess made plans for the night. She decided to meet an old school friend named Riley Simard. Like Ritchie, Simard was from North Bay. She had moved to Toronto in the summer of 2017. The two hadn't seen each other in years, but now that they were both living in the same city, they had started talking again. Simard suggested they go to Crews and Tangos, a well-known drag bar in the Church and Wellesley area. That evening, Rachel's partner ordered Ritchie an Uber so she could meet Simard downtown. Rachel Ritchie recalled seeing her sister running down the front path to the Uber. That fleeting glimpse was the last time she would see her alive. Ritchie arrived at Crews and Tangos around midnight. Simard wasn't there yet. The club was full of people. Tess texted her sister to tell her she reached the place safely. It was commonplace. Ritchie's phone was her second best friend, her sister said. The following morning, Rachel Ritchie sent her younger sister a text message. She didn't expect to hear back immediately, considering Tess had been out the night before. By 6:30 p.m., Rachel still hadn't heard from her. Soon after, she noticed that none of her texts had reached Tess. Rachel tried calling, but all the calls went straight to voicemail. Her mother, Christine Hermiston, also tried to contact Tess, but her phone was off. Christine received a message saying that Tess had ordered an Uber at 4:02 a.m. However, soon after, she canceled it. When registering an Uber account, Tess indicated her mom's credit card. Hence, Christine received a message every time her daughter used a taxi. Tess always kept in touch with her family, so when her phone did not turn on during the day, they began to suspect something could have happened to her. She usually had her phone on her at all times. Rachel asked her partner to check her sister's apartment in Scarborough. At the same time, she started contacting her friends. It was about 9 p.m. on Saturday. Tess was still missing. Her family had a bad feeling about all this. Rachel started calling hospitals and also contacted the police. By the evening of the following day, the police had no news for Tess's family. Several officers tried to find out where Tess Ritchie might be, but no one had seen or heard from her in the last 2 days. On Monday, Tess's mother, Christine, and one of her sisters traveled from North Bay to Toronto to participate in the search. They were putting up and handing out flyers with Tess's picture, hoping someone might have seen her. The family did everything in their power. As for the police, they, unfortunately, did not show their best side when investigating the disappearance of Tess, but we'll talk about this a little later. At the same time, it turned out that Tess's friend, Riley, with whom they visited the bar together, returned home safely after that night. When they asked Riley if she knew where Tess had gone, she said she and Tess had drunk a lot, which resulted in the bar security asking them to leave. They left the bar shortly after 2 in the morning and went to Wellesley Street to eat something. On the way there, they met a guy who eventually went with them. Riley couldn't remember his name. On Wellesley Street, they ordered hot dogs. Tess wanted a vegetarian hot dog, which ended in a conflict with the seller. Tess believed they gave her a hot dog with meat. Riley admitted that her friend took mustard and sprayed the vendor cart with it, after which she, Tess, and the guy with them had to run to Dundonald Street. While there, they saw a woman on the house porch and started talking with her. Her name was Michelle Teep. Their conversation lasted about 20 minutes. Tess told Michelle that she had recently broken up with her boyfriend and shared how hard it was for her. Michelle tried to support Tess. Moreover, they even exchanged phone numbers. Teep said Richie seemed like someone trying to have a good time, but when she looked into her eyes, she saw sadness. The breakup with Julian appeared to be weighing her down. "I told her everything does get better and just to hang in there," Teep said. At 4 a.m., Riley received a text from her boyfriend asking her to come home. She said goodbye to Tess and walked towards Yonge Street and then home. Tess was disappointed that Riley had left her. At 4:02 a.m., she ordered an Uber. Thus, one can assume that after her friend left her, Tess decided to go home too. The driver arrived at 4:14 a.m., but Tess wasn't there. On Wednesday, November 29th, just one day before Tess's 23rd birthday, Christine again distributed flyers with her daughter's picture in the area where people last saw her. Knowing that Riley had parted with Tess on Dundonald Street, Christine decided to explore this area. She turned to Anne Brazeau, a nurse who worked at St. Michael's Hospital, as their daughters had been friends since elementary school in North Bay. Together, they set out to find Richie amid a growing search effort and social media push to locate her. That's when Brazeau made a haunting discovery. Peering into the bottom of an outdoor stairwell in a construction site at 582 Church Street, Brazeau immediately recognized Richie's body lying on the concrete. In 2017, this building was under reconstruction and partially fenced. It looked like this. "I went into complete shock, horror, disbelief. I couldn't process or make sense of what I was seeing," Brazeau said through tears. "I was terrified." Dust from a nearby gravel pile lay like soot on her body. Brazeau let go of the staircase railing and walked backward down the gravel driveway toward Church Street. Hermiston was farther up the sidewalk by that point, unaware that her daughter's body was so close by. Brazeau began to call out to her. "Christine, come back here," she said. "There's a girl in the stairwell. You've got to come back." Hermiston turned, raced down the driveway, and stopped dead at the stairwell. After a few moments, she started screaming and asking God for help. Tess's death became a heartbreaking challenge for her whole family. They found her body just 300 yards from the bar where she spent time before she disappeared, and just 20 yards from where her friend Riley last saw her. It raised a lot of questions about the work of the police. After all, her body was a couple of blocks from the bar all this time. However, after Anne and Christine found Tess's body, an anonymous police source provided the press with new information. Allegedly, Tess advertised her intimate services via the internet and worked in a strip club. The grieving mother said Toronto police didn't do enough to search for Richie because they assumed she was an escort. "It was horrifying to read that," Hermiston replied angrily at what police sources told the media after her body's discovery. She was not making a living in the sex trade industry. It's a blatant lie. They leaked that so it would look like she lived a high-risk life and was in a laneway with somebody, and it wasn't their fault. Although Tess did work as a waitress at a strip club, she quit less than 2 weeks after they hired her. As for intimate services advertisement, it was just an account on a dating site. Even though they had found Richie's body, there was no explanation for what happened to her. Police did not initially suspect foul play, but the homicide unit eventually took over the case after an autopsy revealed she had died of neck compression. Moreover, they found seminal fluid on the girl's clothes and saliva on her bra. After some tests, they found traces of male DNA. Thus, the police finally started searching for a suspect. Considering Riley's testimony, The detectives were trying to figure out the identity of the guy the girls met that night. After all, he was the person Tess stayed with after Riley went home. The police turned to CCTV footage to learn more about that night. This video shows Tess and Riley leaving the bar and going towards the hot dog vendor's cart. There were also CCTV cameras on the building close to where Brazo found the body. After analyzing the recordings, the police saw Tess and her new acquaintance walking hand in hand up the gravel driveway. According to the information voiced by the police, the camera captured Tess and this unknown man at 4:14 a.m. The following recording, taken 46 minutes later, shows the guy leaving the place alone. Tess never appeared in the footage again. Therefore, the police believe this man was the main suspect in the Tess Ritchie case. On December 10th, during a press conference, the Toronto police published pictures of this man taken with the help of a video surveillance system. They hoped someone would recognize him. The pictures, taken by an ATM camera, were of poor quality. An ATM was next to the place where Ritchie bought hot dogs. In the evening of the same day, the police discovered the identity of this man. Oddly enough, after seeing the published images, the man called the police station himself. "I'm the guy in the photo," he said. The person who was with Tess that night was 21-year-old Kaylin Schlatter. In the fall of 2017, Schlatter was 21 and living with his parents and younger brother at their North Toronto home. He had completed a year of postgraduate study as a car mechanic and worked with his dad in construction. Schlatter, his parents, and one of his lawyers went to the police station, where he briefly spoke with detectives but refused to testify. His parents brought some food and a bottle of water for their son. In the end, they provided police with some crucial evidence. While still at the police station, Schlatter threw an empty water bottle into a trash can. The police promptly seized it and sent it for forensic medical examination. It took some time, but eventually, they determined that the DNA sample on the bottle and DNA samples extracted from seminal fluid and saliva found on Tess Ritchie's body belonged to the same person. Police planned an undercover operation to monitor Schlatter for several weeks, but the DNA results accelerated the process. Schlatter was arrested around 11 p.m. on February 4, 2018, after watching the Super Bowl with his family at the Cineplex Cinemas Queensway in Etobicoke. They took him to 13 Division and placed him in a holding cell at 3:19 a.m. on February 5th. Two other men were locked in holding cells on either side of him. Schlatter had no idea both were undercover cops and that he was about to give them an abundance of evidence. The three men sat in separate, nondescript holding cells with a combination toilet and sink as well as a bed. Schlatter was locked in the cell between the two cops, with all three men facing the same wall. None of them could see each other, but that didn't stop them from talking for hours. Schlatter told these policemen about his passion for card games and his ability to seduce women. According to him, he has slept with more than 40 women, even though he was only 21 years old. However, he did not mention that he liked both men and women. As it turned out later, Schlatter did not meet Tess and her friend Riley on the street. He was in the same bar as them. That's where he first noticed them. This recording was made shortly before security asked Tess and Riley to leave the bar. Here's Riley, and here's Tess. And this is Schlatter. Schlatter also told undercover officers about Tess. At first, he said that she was alive when he left. Shortly after, Schlatter added that something could have happened because alcohol clouded his mind. He thought he was not capable of it. The police charged Kaylin Schlatter with taking the life of Tess Ritchie, but of course, he denied his guilt. In June 2018, two police officers, Alan McCullough and Michael Jones, were charged with 2 counts of misconduct for neglect of duty under Ontario's Police Services Act. According to the notice of hearing, they allegedly failed to thoroughly search the adjoining property or immediate area, interview neighbors, and notify a supervisor. If they had followed protocol, Christine Hermiston stated, they would have found her. She was lying just around the corner. Despite all this, both officers remained working in the police, but received penalties. As for Kaylin Schlatter, during the 7-week trial held in 2020, His defense tried to prove his innocence, arguing that someone else could have approached the stairs where Tess was lying by climbing over the fence on the other side of the building and thus remain invisible to the cameras. The lawyers even gave the name of another suspect, but the police thoroughly checked and interrogated this person, finding no evidence linking him to Tess's death. DNA evidence pointed to only one person, Kalen Schlatter. Schlatter was a slight man who appeared soft-spoken in court. He said he has a speech defect that causes him to slur his words and stutter sometimes. Trying to explain the presence of his DNA on Tess's belongings, he said she offered him to hide from prying eyes. At 4:02 a.m., Tess Ritchie ordered an Uber. The driver arrived at the pickup point at 4:14 a.m., but Tess wasn't there. Instead of letting Ritchie meet her Uber driver, Schlatter again approached her. They sat down on a bench at the corner of Church and Dundonald. Tess seemed a bit more upset from the argument, so I walked over to her to check if she was all right, Schlatter said. He said it was Ritchie who asked him to sit and talk. It's impossible to corroborate his account, as there is no sound on any security video from the area. Schlatter testified Ritchie was bummed about her breakup, so he started talking about the dissolution of one of his previous relationships to make her feel better. She listened intently, he said, and even declined a phone call during their conversation. It was a lie. The police examined Tess's mobile phone records and discovered no one had called her during their conversation. Later on, she asked if it's okay if she kisses me, Schlatter said. We stand up and give each other a hug and kiss. These words could not be confirmed either, since there weren't any kisses on the CCTV footage available to the police. According to Schlatter, Ritchie asked him to follow her to the driveway at 582 Church Street and down into the property's outdoor stairwell. The prosecution considered these words a lie because, at that time, the Uber driver was waiting for Tess. They suggested that Schlatter offered to escort Tess to her car, but he was planning something completely different. We will never know what Kalen Schlatter told Tess Ritchie as they walked up Church Street to convince her to walk into the dark at 4 a.m. with a man she just met. Schlatter claimed that he and Tess went down the stairs and started kissing. He wanted more, but Tess said they couldn't go any further. According to Schlatter, they kissed for a long time, which resulted in him ejaculating into his pants. After that, he invited Tess to his house, but she refused and said he could leave, which he did. Schlatter continued insisting Tess was alive when he left. It is important to note that all of the above was Schlatter's story, which the police could not verify. Only 2 people knew the truth about what happened that night. One of them was already dead. The prosecution's witnesses at the trial were Riley, a friend of Tess, and Michelle Teep, a woman with whom they talked that night. They both identified Schlatter. Schlatter not only spilled his guts to 2 undercover cops, he allegedly confided crucial details to a cellmate when they were at a Toronto detention center for roughly 2 months in 2018. The man, who can only be referred to as ES because of a publication ban, has a criminal record spanning decades, including several break-and-enters and a domestic assault. The informant said he initially felt sorry for Schlatter, as he was a young man in jail for the first time. That's why ES invited him to share his cell while the 2 were in protective custody. But over time, ES soured on his new cellmate. Schlatter would cry himself to sleep at night because he didn't want to do time and because he missed his mommy. And yet he showed no remorse about Ritchie's death, ES said. He said Schlatter told him about his kiss with Ritchie and that he lost control when she said she didn't want to go any further. He couldn't stop and strangled Tess with a scarf. In court, Schlatter flatly denied that those conversations took place. His lawyer called ES a manipulative, pathological liar. Putting aside all the testimony and relying only on physical evidence, one can conclude that someone strangled Tess Ritchie and only one person's DNA was on her clothes, Kalen Schlatter. In her closing address to the jury, defense lawyer Lydia Riva portrayed Schlatter as a harmless kid and an innocent young man. As hard as it might be to accept, and as uncomfortable as it might make us feel, the criminal justice system can get it wrong, Riva said. Mr. Schlatter was an easy target. He is easy to blame. On March 23, 2020, the jury found Schlatter guilty. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment with the right to request parole after 25 years. The trial was heartbreaking for Richie's mother, sisters, and other supporters, who were at times reeling and crying in the courtroom. While they now have some of the answers they craved for so long, their lives are forever changed. Evil not only took Tess that night, it sentenced her surviving family to a cruel and painful future while robbing the world of so much love and potential, said Richie's sister Verena. Tess was the heart of my family, and we will forever be incomplete. In June 2020, Tess Richie's family sued Schlatter, the police, and others because of the psychological devastation they experienced after Tess's death. Do I want to just go in the house and hide and let it go? Absolutely. But can I? Absolutely not. I can't, because I can't get it out of my head that they let her lay there for 4 days, said Christine Hermiston. That image is seared in her mind forever, Hermiston said. That image that she should not have needed to travel from her home in North Bay, Ontario to Toronto to do the job of the police. Tess was the glue of the family, and her death has torn everyone apart, her mother said. We have trouble looking at each other. We feel like we all let Tess down. We feel a lot of guilt, and that's why we're continuing to fight on behalf of Tess, because we're not going to let her down again. They are seeking a total of $20 million in damages, including punitive damages. The case of Sheila LaBarre, a monster with an angelic appearance. Psychological and physical traumas received at an early age can have a very unpredictable effect on adult life. Of course, far from always, they lead to the fact that a person becomes cruel and seeks to hurt others, but sometimes it is the trauma can give rise to a real monster. Criminal psychologist Adrian Raine believes that there are genetic and psychophysical mechanisms that can turn a person into a cold-blooded killer, about which he wrote in detail in his book, Anatomy of Violence. History knows a lot of serial criminals who had a truly hellish childhood, and perhaps to them can be attributed our heroine today, Sheila LaBarre. This woman had an angelic appearance which she skillfully used, seducing her victims and then brutally murdered them. Despite the fact that the court was able to prove only 2 of her crimes, criminologists are sure that there were many more. And now let's look at this difficult story from the beginning and try to understand whether Sheila LaBarre was a born monster or became him as a result of the cruelty that she faced in childhood. Who is Sheila LaBarre? Sheila LaBarre was born in 1958, the 4th of July, in the small country town of Fort Payne, Alabama. She was the youngest of 3 children of her parents and was raised with her brother and sister Lynn. Her childhood was spent in a picturesque but rather secluded place, on a farm nestled among cornfields. According to the memories of Lynn's older sibling, Sheila was an active, inquisitive, and open-minded girl with a creative streak. She liked to be in the center of attention, had a good voice and cute appearance, so perhaps, if her life had turned out differently, she would have become a famous actress or singer. But instead of bright posters, her name decorated the pages of criminal chronicles. The unimaginable cruelty of her father. The head of the family, Manuel Bailey, for many years suffered from alcohol addiction, although it would be more accurate to say that his addiction suffered from his entire family. He often went on binges, turning into a real beast who enjoyed abusing his wife and children. He insulted and humiliated them, beat them with anything that came to hand, could throw everyone out in the middle of the night in a downpour or frost, and locked himself in the house, not letting anyone inside. Mothers, daughters, and sons often had to spend the night in a barn or in the open air in the field. One day, when Manuel was once again in a drunken rage, he began throwing dishes and other objects at his family members. The mother tried to cover the children as best she could, but one of the flower pots thrown by her husband hit her youngest daughter Sheila in the head. Sheila suffered a serious concussion and a lifelong scar on her temple, which she painstakingly covered with her hair. But not even the insults and beatings were the worst thing that the sisters had to endure in their parents' home. According to the memories of Sheila and Lynn, Manuel from an early age forcibly inclined them to intimacy. The mother may have been aware of what was going on, but the subject was never broached. However, despite the nightmare at home, Sheila did well enough in school. She dreamed of leaving the farm as soon as possible and go to conquer the big city. The girl was quite ambitious and determined. She passionately wanted to realize her childhood dream in life and become an actress or pop singer. And she had everything for this: charisma, bright appearance, and a beautiful voice. Adulthood, first marriage. Barely Sheila was 18 years old. She left her parents' home, but adult life was not so joyful. To enter the university, she was not allowed to average score, and to move to the big city, she simply did not have the money. Then Sheila got a job as a maid in one of the hotels, where by that time her older sister was already working. It should be noted that Sheila had a slender figure and a very attractive appearance. She had big blue eyes, a charming smile, and a mop of thick long hair. She was surrounded by attention from men, and over time, she learned to use it and manipulate her suitors. In the late 70s, LeBar, then Bailey, met a guy named Jonathan Baxter, and a romantic relationship began between them. Jonathan was not yet 20 years old at the time, but he already had a young daughter from a previous relationship. However, the child did not become a hindrance, and soon the couple got married. However, this marriage lasted only a few months and collapsed after Jonathan learned that the young wife abused his daughter while he disappeared at work. Sheila was frankly annoyed with the child, and she would raise her hand or lock her in a closet if she started crying or acting up. Jonathan did not organize scandals and listen to explanations. He just Strazoot filed for divorce and put his wife with his belongings outside his house. He never wanted to see or hear from her again. After the divorce, Sheila dated various men and mostly lived off them. But all these relationships were fleeting and lasted from a few weeks to a couple of months, until in the early 80s she met her future second husband, Ronnie Jennings. The tumultuous romance soon led to marriage, and Sheila took on a double last name, Bailey Jennings. It was an unhealthy relationship between two irascible and unstable people who regularly cheated on each other, scandalized, and even fought. Still, their marriage lasted more than 3 years. In 1984, after another family quarrel, Sheila demanded a divorce from her husband, but he refused her. In fact, Ronnie did not hold on to the relationship at all. He just wanted to piss off his wife and make her mad, and he succeeded. Sheila became hysterical, took a large number of drugs in front of her husband, drinking strong alcohol, and after this infernal cocktail, sat behind the wheel of the car and rushed down the road. Naturally, soon Sheila, under the influence of pills and alcohol, lost consciousness, flew off the road, and at high speed crashed into a tree. She miraculously survived, but suffered a massive head injury. She spent more than a week in a deep coma, and doctors made no prognosis. When Sheila finally regained consciousness and gradually recovered, she was transferred to a psychiatric hospital where she spent several months. She later complained to her sister that one of the orderlies was constantly harassing her and possibly taking advantage of her helpless state when she was heavily sedated. After all this, Sheila returned to her second husband's home, but began to behave not just aggressively, but threateningly toward him. When during another scandal she attacked Ronnie and poked him in the chest with nail scissors, Ronnie, fearing for his own life and health, filed for divorce and hurriedly moved out of the mad woman. Rich lover. When the second marriage was dissolved, the young woman began looking for lovers through the dating columns of the print media, and she left her ads there as well. But no man did not stay with her for long, because Sheila tended to dominate everything, rigidly suppressing their partners both in intimate and everyday life. Soon the photo of an attractive girl in the dating section drew the attention of 60-year-old Wilfred Bill LeBar. The man had previously been married twice and had adult children and grandchildren from previous marriages. He was widowed a few years ago and had been living alone on his large country ranch ever since. Bill was a fairly wealthy man. He had a chiropractic office in Epping, New Hampshire, and on the ranch he raised horses. At the same time, he was very lonely and needed a strong, powerful woman. In fact, that's exactly what he found. Sheila was attracted by the wealth of her new acquaintance, and she decided that it would be an ideal union for her. And to make Bill completely lost his head, she began to send him a postal mail frank letters, supplementing them with her nude photos. The trap worked, and soon LeBar invited a charming pen pal to visit his ranch. Their romance developed rapidly. An elderly man is not stingy on expensive gifts for a young mistress, and in the summer of 1987, she moved to live with him. This has incredibly flattered the doctor, who now went out in public with a beautiful companion who was half his age and was fit for him as a daughter. Nevertheless, he did not plan to marry Sheila. However, Sheila, not waiting for a marriage proposal, changed her name, calling herself Labar. Bill was surprised by this turn of events, but he did not object. Sheila began to interfere in all the affairs of her elderly lover, starting to control his business, finances, and disposition of his property. In addition, Bill was getting older and could not satisfy the intimate needs of a young woman. Then, according to Sheila herself, he allowed her to meet other men, whom she often brought directly to their home. One of Sheila's regular lovers, closer to the mid-90s, was a Jamaican national named Wayne Ennis. He was much younger than Sheila and was initially hired as an au pair on the ranch, but soon the young man, with Bill's consent, which was probably given under pressure from Sheila, moved to live in the owner's house. In 1995, Sheila and Wayne officially legalized their relationship, and the spouse considered that from now on, he would be her only man. But soon he realized that he was wrong, because his wife continued to meet with different men. Wayne was not satisfied with this, and one day he jumped with fists on Sheila and her next lover, causing them bodily harm. Accustomed to being dominated, Sheila for the first time didn't know how to deal with her third husband, who got into a fight every time a rival appeared on the horizon. Eventually, she filed for divorce and sought a court injunction to stop Wayne from approaching her, accusing him of violence and assault. Another divorce did not affect the turbulent personal life of Sheila, who continued to meet with numerous lovers, changing them like gloves. True, now her relationship increasingly often began to end with lawsuits from men who accused Sheila not just in cruelty, but also in the threat to their lives and health. Thus, one of her boyfriends she deliberately hit by a car and almost ran over. Another almost broke his head, and another scratched his face so that he was forever scarred. Sheila, with age, became more and more dangerous to others. From every man she demanded obedience, and in cases of disobedience, fell into a rage. In 2000, at the age of 74, Bill Labar died of heart failure. Although doctors and police officers did not see a criminal trail in the death of an elderly man, his family members were convinced that Sheila had something to do with it. In their opinion, she had been poisoning Bill little by little for years, and literally drove him into the light. Despite the fact that Bill and Sheila were never officially married, Sheila, according to the will, became the sole heiress of all his property. The relatives tried to challenge this through the courts, but never got anywhere. They are still convinced that the mistress forced Bill to write the will she wanted. House of Temptation. After Bill's death, as I have already mentioned, all his property came under Sheila's complete control. Now she no longer had to consider anyone's opinion. She could do whatever she wanted with the estate she had inherited. She herself called her home a place of seduction and pleasure, where there were no inhibitions. She met men on the streets, in bars, on the internet, lured them to her, and then tried to keep them on the ranch as long as possible. She didn't care about their age, skin color, or any physical appearance. She promised them unearthly pleasure, and then sought to suppress and subjugate them to her will. Sheila regularly tried to seduce couriers by meeting them in the nude and offering an alternative method of payment. But she didn't take into account the fact that she herself was not getting any younger, and was nowhere near as attractive as she used to be. It got to the point where couriers simply refused to come to her address. Neighbors noticed that on the ranch, Labar, constantly come different men, but some hurried to leave the place the same day. Others were delayed, but also for a short time. What was going on in the house itself could only be guessed at. Where had Michael DeLorge disappeared to? Soon, Sheila decided to look for lovers among men who were in dire need of housing, money, or those men who suffered from addiction. This category was the most vulnerable, and proved to be an easy prey for the cunning woman, who everywhere posed as a widowed millionaire, and talked about her untold wealth, inherited by her. In 2004, Labar met on one of the city streets homeless man named Michael DeLodge. He was in a difficult life situation and lost literally everything because of addiction to illegal drugs. His relatives tried to send him to a rehabilitation clinic, but he ran away from there and has been loitering ever since. Sheila liked Michael, and she invited him to her, promising shelter, food, and the necessary drugs in exchange for intimacy. Moving to the ranch, the guy was completely dependent on his old mistress. He complied with all her demands, afraid to be on the street again. But Sheila quickly got into the taste, and her desires became more and more sophisticated. She bound, beat, and humiliated Michael, taking pleasure in it. He tried to escape several times, walking dozens of miles and hiding in homeless shelters, but he never decided to go to the police for fear they wouldn't believe him. Meanwhile, Sheila found him each time and brought him back to the ranch. In desperation, he tried to contact his family members and let them know he was in trouble. His loved ones immediately responded to this disturbing news, but it was too late. In October 2005, Michael DeLorge disappeared without a trace. When his family contacted Sheila directly, she stated that she and Michael had broken up. He had left her, and his current whereabouts were unknown to her. Michael did not show up at any of the places he had been to before. No one who knew him had seen him, and there was no way to contact him. Contacting the police was fruitless, and Labar remained beyond suspicion, trusting Kenny County. Sheila's tales of her exorbitant wealth were greatly exaggerated, and the house and automobile had to be maintained, so she was forced to get a job. Naturally, Sheila chose an occupation to her liking. She became an operator of intimate phone services. Since she had a truly enchanting voice, men fell for the bait and offered to meet her in person. Among such guys was Kenny County, who at the time of their acquaintance was barely 24 years old. The young man was attractive in appearance, very good-natured and open. However, he had a low IQ level, due to which he was very gullible. This was exactly the kind of guy Labar was looking for. Kenny was very close to his mother, on whom he actually depended, but Sheila, with the help of clever manipulations, managed to break this connection and literally lure Kenny to herself. She made him an unforgettable night of love and promised that they would be like this all the time. The young man decided that he had met the woman of his dreams, about which he informed his relatives, and then moved to live in Sheila's house. But soon Sheila showed the guy her true face, having arranged for him a real torture room in one of the rooms. Each time, intimacy inevitably turned into a brutal beating or something worse. Kenny's body was covered with bruises, abrasions, scratches, cuts, and burn marks. But he could not leave the house of the mistress who had completely subjugated his will. Sheila did not allow him to see and communicate with his loved ones, and his family could only guess what was happening to Kenny. The first alarm was raised by neighbors who periodically noticed the guy and were horrified by his sickly appearance. A few days before his disappearance, a local store clerk took a picture of the young man on her cell phone camera, and later this picture was attached to the case file in court. In the photo, Kenny's condition could be described as deplorable. He was very thin, there were huge bruises under his eye and on his cheek, and his nose was probably broken. Judging by the degree of healing, all these injuries had been inflicted at different times, which suggested that the guy had been brutally beaten for a long time. The contents of his cart were also alarming. He rolled 2 large canisters of fuel to the cash register, as it later turned out, for his own cremation. The store employees were so puzzled and even frightened by the guy's appearance that they decided to report him to the police for possible domestic violence. But this time, Sheila managed to get away with it, and they could not charge her with anything. Soon Kenny stopped contacting his family altogether, and when his worried mother arrived at Labar's house, the owner behaved aggressively and advised to leave Kenny alone. All subsequent attempts ended similarly, at which point Kenny County's family filed a missing persons report with the police, indicating that he may be being held forcibly at the country ranch, a home crematorium, and gruesome findings. When police arrived at Sheila's home, she claimed that the young man no longer lived with her, and claimed that Kenny had run away because his mother, whom he was allegedly terrified of, began visiting them frequently. As evidence, Sheila provided an audio recording in which she asks her lover if his own mother had attacked him, and he quietly gives an affirmative answer. It all seemed more than strange, and the very next day, an officer visiting Sheila secured a search warrant for the estate. Sheila had been on the police's radar many times before, and her name had been linked to another mysterious disappearance of a boyfriend. But over the years, Sheila had never been questioned, and her house and grounds had never been searched. When the police arrived, they did not find Labar at home, but they did see several fires burning near the outbuildings. The fires looked strange and were made of improvised materials, a mattress, fragments of wooden furniture, hay, etc., all doused with a flammable mixture. One of the bonfires had bones in it that clearly looked like human remains. The squad requested reinforcements in the form of forensic experts, reporting all the findings, but that turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg compared to what they discovered next. Almost all over the house were found poorly washed traces of blood. It was so much that it seemed as if there had been a real massacre. It turned out that the blood belonged to at least 3 different people. The bones smoldering in the fire belonged to the missing Kenny, and there were 2 empty fuel cans lying nearby, the same ones the boy had bought at the local store the day before. But that wasn't all. Also found on the property were the remains of Michael Delage, who had disappeared a few years earlier, and some fingers of some third guy who was never identified. Among other things, a large number of items belonging, judging by the size, to various men were fished out of the sump at the ranch, the fates of which have not been learned. The hostess herself was not at home at the time of the police visit. She had figured it out and gone on the run. Sheila hitchhiked to Boston, where she obviously hoped to get lost. Moreover, on the way, she seduced one of the drivers who gave her a ride, and he trustingly invited her to live in his house. However, the next day, having seen on TV news about the search for a dangerous criminal, the new lover himself called the police and reported that Sheila is now in his bed. It was there that she was arrested. During the search of Sheila's home, another frightening find was made, a box of videotapes. On the tapes, Hanny, Michael, and several other men confessed to horrific crimes, but judging by the guy's appearance and condition, they made these confessions under torture. Since Labar's arrest, her mental health has raised a lot of questions, so the court ordered the necessary evaluations. Sheila was found to have a delusional disorder, as well as signs of schizophrenia. She called herself an angel sent from heaven to protect children from rapists. It was Sheila's failing mental health that became the basis on which her attorney tried to build a defense. He called his client a profoundly sick person and tried to prove that she was not aware of her actions. The reason for this was the mental and physical trauma she had suffered as a child. The defendant herself claimed that many years ago, when she was in that terrible accident and found herself in a coma on the verge of death, she met with God, and the latter told her to cleanse the world of men who infringe on children. Sheila's ex-husbands and some of Sheila's lovers also spoke in court who, in one voice, called her a crazy, unstable, and extremely violent woman. And Wayne Ennis, the third husband, said that the ex-wife repeatedly persuaded him to kill Mr. Labar in order to seize his property. But despite the defense's attempts to convince the court that Sheila was insane and in need of treatment, it was proven that she was aware of her actions at the time of her crimes. She was found guilty in July 2008 and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of ever being released. All of her appeals were rejected. Sheila is now serving her sentence in Florida at Homestead Correctional Facility. March 14, 2003. The Hobbit Pub, Southampton, England. On that evening, everyone at this pub was chilling out. Among them were a girl named Hannah Foster and her friend. Both of them were having a great time there, and when they felt it was getting late, both friends left the pub by 10:50 p.m. Now, since it was quite late at night, Hannah Foster's friend caught a bus from a road named Portswood and headed home. On the other hand, Hannah started walking home because her house was just 800 meters away, roughly 0.5 miles. 3 people lived in Hannah's house: her father, Trevor Foster, her mother, Hilary Foster, and her younger sister, Sarah. The Fosters were early sleepers and early risers, so they usually went to bed early. They assumed that their daughter would come home, eat, and then go to bed on her own. However, when Hannah's mother woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, she couldn't find Hannah anywhere in the house. Normally, it wouldn't take Hannah more than half an hour to come home, but now several hours had passed. Therefore, Hannah's mother, Hilary, called her daughter, but Hannah wasn't answering any calls. After this, Gradually, Hannah's father and younger sister also come to know about her. Following this, Hannah's father, Trevor Foster, calls the girl with whom Hannah went to the Hobbit pub the previous night, but she tells the same story that I've already told you. After this, Hannah's family also tries to find her themselves, but by now it was already 10:30 in the morning, so Hannah's father starts to worry a lot about his daughter. Because of this, he goes to the Southampton police station and files a missing complaint for Hannah. Now the police start investigating the missing person case from their side and first trace her phone. Well, the good thing was that Hannah's phone was active, and the police traced the phone through the mobile towers. Naturally, the location of Hannah's phone was showing approximately 20 to 25 miles away from her home. Now the police reached there within an hour. Where the police found Hannah's phone was the city's recycling center, and along with the phone, they also found Hannah's bag there, but Hannah was not found. On March 15th, Hannah is also extensively searched for, but her whereabouts are not found. As they continue the search, March 16th arrives, and Southampton police receive a call from an anonymous man from the outskirts of the city. He informs them that he has just seen a girl's body in the bushes. A police team is dispatched to the location provided by the man. Since the previous day, the police had been searching for Hannah Foster, and they also had her picture. Therefore, the police first compare Hannah's picture with the discovered dead body, and they believe it to be Hannah Foster's. Subsequently, Hannah's family is also summoned, and upon seeing a member of their family in this condition, they become quite emotional. Nonetheless, the body is then sent for post-mortem. The police have to wait for several hours for it. However, when the post-mortem report arrives, it states that Hannah was first raped and then murdered by strangulation. However, some traces of the killer's semen were found on Hannah's clothes, and this made the police believe that the case would be solved soon, because DNA would be extracted from the semen and matched with the database to find the killer. But the police's imagination proved wrong when the DNA sample of the killer was not found in their database. Anyway, here the police, losing hope, check Hannah's call details, which leads the investigators to take another step towards solving this case. Actually, Hannah had last called the emergency number 999 from her phone, and the operator had answered the call. The call lasted for 50 seconds. After that, the police reached the operator and collect Hannah's call recording from there. In addition, the operator said, "I kept saying, 'This is emergency helpline, what's an emergency?' for 50 seconds, but there was no response from the other end." When investigators enhanced the recording of Hannah's call, they realized that she is sitting in a moving vehicle. Additionally, there is another faint voice with a South Asian accent. The man asks Hannah questions while she sits quietly, appearing scared and intimidated. After obtaining the call recording, the investigating team accelerates progress in Hannah Foster's murder case. Now, the police also check all the CCTV cameras in the area where Hannah's friend last bid her farewell and caught a bus. After scrutinizing several CCTV footages from that road, the police eventually narrow down to 7 suspect vehicles. On the other hand, Hannah's parents are eager to see their daughter's killer brought to justice swiftly. They now also discuss these 7 vehicles in public. In the meantime, on March 26th, Hannah's parents talked to people through a local crime TV show called Crime Watch about those cars. As a result, it emerged that one of the 7 suspect vehicles shown on TV was a van belonging to their company, Hazelwood Foods. The supervisor, James Dennis, called in and said that the driver of this van does not have his own vehicle, so he also uses this van to come and go from his home. Furthermore, that night, the driver had gone to deliver on this road. The time and location of the van were exactly where Hannah had started to walk home alone. After that, the police get a good lead for the first time in this case. But the man driving the van was named Maninder Pal Singh Kohli. Upon speaking to the company's supervisor, it was found that on the morning of March 15th, Maninder Pal came to work, but there were some marks on his face, whereas there were no marks on his face the previous day, that is on the 14th. Additionally, on March 15th, Maninder only worked half a day and then took half a day off citing a back pain reason. However, it was only later discovered by the police that Maninder hadn't returned to work since that day. Now, hearing the whole story, investigating officers along with forensic experts arrived at Hazelwood Company. Subsequently, the van driven by Maninder was thoroughly examined by forensic experts, and some traces of semen and blood were found in his vehicle as well. With all this evidence, such as Maninder Pal's disappearance, finding semen and blood in his van, they were pointing fingers directly at him for Hannah's murder. However, apart from this, the police once again scrutinized Maninder Pal's van through CCTV cameras, and it becomes clear from the CCTV footage that Maninder Pal had taken his van to the recycling center on the night of March 14th, and where Hannah's body was found, his van had also passed through that road. Maninder Pal had now become the prime suspect for the police. Therefore, the police now embark on the search for Maninder Pal, and first they go to his home address, obtained from the sandwich company where he used to work. There, Maninder Pal's wife and 2 children used to live, and his wife was a citizen of the UK. But upon reaching there, the police learn something that completely changes the course of the case. In fact, Maninder's wife reveals that he had actually left for India on March 18th because Maninder's mother was very ill. After learning this, it was imperative for the Southampton police to apprehend Maninder Pal in the Hannah Foster murder case, but it was equally challenging. And then, amidst all this, when a blood sample is taken from one of Maninder Pal's sons and the DNA is extracted from it, it matches the DNA found on Hannah's clothes and inside Maninder Pal's van. Now, because a son inherits about half of his father's genes, therefore, the DNA of both the father and son is approximately 99.99% identical. It had already been confirmed that Maninder Pal was indeed the real culprit. After that, the police from England contacts India through the government. Now, since Maninder Pal's ancestral home was in the city of Chandigarh in India, assistance is sought from the police there. Subsequently, the Chandigarh police obtained the address of Maninder's house and reached there. Here, the police find out that Maninder Pal had come to meet his mother a few days ago, but after staying there for 3 to 4 days, he left. Since then, he has not contacted his home. The police also learn another piece of information from Maninder Pal's family at home, that when he was in England, he used to wear a turban and keep a beard. But when he came to India, he got a clean shave and also got his hair cut. Until now, Hannah's parents had also found out about their daughter's killer, and they were also waiting for him to be caught. But now, the Chandigarh police was not giving this case much priority. By this time, the news of this case had not even appeared in the Indian media, so normal people didn't know much about it. As time passed slowly, there was not much progress in the investigation. A considerable amount of time had passed, so Hannah's parents took it upon themselves to catch the killer. Then, about 15 months after their daughter's death on July 10, 2004, they come to India. At this time, they were only in India for 10 days. After that, they come straight to Chandigarh and speak to the local media there, appealing to catch their daughter's killer, Maninder Pal. Apart from this, Hannah's parents had separate pictures of Maninder. In one photo, he had a beard and a turban, while in another photo, he had shaved his beard and cut his hair. It was easy to identify Maninder through these pictures. After this, Hannah's parents waited for a few days. But then they decided to go to Delhi because there are national and international media offices. I made a promise that we wouldn't rest until Hannah's killer was brought together. After this step by Hannah's parents, the news of their daughter's murder spread throughout India within 24 hours. The headline of every newspaper and news channel became Hannah Foster and Maninder Pal. Here, Hannah's parents also arranged a free hotline so that anyone who knew about the murderer could call this number. The Southampton police here announced through a news agency called The Sun that they would give 5 million Indian rupees to the person who provides any information about Maninder Pal. By now, this news had spread like wildfire throughout India. Then, on July 15, 2004, a car driver residing in the city of Darjeeling, in the state of West Bengal, India, called a retired police officer whom he knew. Now this police officer had already retired. The driver called the officer and told him, "There is a man who has been living here for a few months, and his appearance resembles that of Hannah Foster's killer, as shown in the news. He started appearing here shortly after Hannah's murder." Upon hearing the driver's words, the retired officer immediately sets out to see this man. The officer remembered Maninder Pal's face because they were following this case through the news channel. Afterwards, when that driver showed the police officer the man, the officer was quite surprised. Then he immediately contacted the local police, and the local police caught Maninder Pal in the bus, going from Kalimpong town to Nepal. Here the police find out that Maninder Pal was planning to flee to Nepal after seeing his news on TV channels and newspapers. Besides, the police also find out that Maninder Pal had changed his name to Mike Davis in West Bengal. In addition to Maninder, there was also a woman on the bus, and then it was revealed that Maninder had remarried after coming to India. Now Maninder was arrested and brought to Delhi, and during the custody of a few days here, Maninder confessed to his crime. Then he told the whole story of how he murdered Hannah that night. The story was something like this. Actually, on the night of March 14, 2003, Maninder was parked on that road drinking in his van where Hannah passed by. But when he saw Hannah, bad thoughts started coming to his mind. Afterwards, he forcibly kidnapped Hannah and placed her in the van. Although there, Hannah requested to be released from Maninder, but Maninder paid no heed to her requests. In the meantime, Hannah also called the emergency helpline number, but due to Maninder's presence, she couldn't say anything. This led the call operator to believe it might be a missed dial. Later, Maninder takes Hannah to a deserted area and rapes her. However, after committing the crime, he realizes that if he lets Hannah go alive, she will go to the police and file a complaint. Therefore, Maninder strangles her to death. Then he disposes of Hannah's body where it was found. On March 15th, the next day, Maninder takes half a day off from work under the pretext of a back pain. But he had Hannah's mobile phone and handbag with him, so he dumps them in a recycling bin at the city recycling center. Afterwards, he goes to one of his friends and asks for some money on loan because he had to go to India to meet his sick mother. However, his friend doesn't have as much money as Maninder needed. Then Maninder comes back home and also tells his British wife that his mother is sick in India and he needs to go there and requires some money. Understanding Maninder's need, his wife talks to her father, and on March 17th, Maninder's father-in-law lends him some money. The very next day, Maninder catches a flight to India. However, the excuse of his mother being sick was just a pretext. In reality, Maninder had come to India to escape from the England police. Upon arriving in India, Maninder goes to Chandigarh, his ancestral home, meets his mother, but here he completely changes his appearance. After changing his appearance, Maninder goes to Darjeeling, and after some time he changes his name and marries another woman there, where he starts living thereafter. Now, because neither anyone in India knew about Hannah Foster's murder nor about Maninder Pal, Maninder wasn't caught for 15 months. But then, when Hannah's parents come to India, only then is Maninder caught. Anyway, after that, Maninder is brought to Delhi, and then on July 28, 2004, giving an interview to a news channel, he confessed his crime on TV. Hannah Foster. Let's cross the road. I was coming up of the makeup up. My van left parked on that little road that he's walking. Just quite loud, and I came, on that road, and that's all I had to go. And then I stopped right away to, But upon the whole incident, while confessing, Maninder denies and says, "That night I had drunk a lot. I didn't want to kill Hannah, but when I mocked her, then Hannah started threatening to complain to the police. Although I threatened her a lot, but she didn't agree, which led me to kill her. I wrote walking alone that night. But then my mother is very ill in India. I want to work with the eyes low. It is very, very vital upon me, that her, that I was probably black, that might on my hand was, and I done that crying." However, in August 2004, Maninder Pal changed his statement. He said, I didn't do all this willingly, but it was done to me forcibly. After this statement, Meninder was placed under judicial custody in Delhi, and then the process of extradition to Britain begins. This process takes about 3 years, but finally on June 8, 2007, the court granted permission for Maninder Pal to go to England. Once in England, Hampshire police arrest Maninder. Then Meninder's blood sample is taken, and it matches 100% with the DNA found from Hannah's clothes and semen obtained from the van. After that, from December 10, 2007, the trial begins in the Winchester Crown Court. Here, Maninder appeals not guilty to all the charges against him. Maninder said, that night, some criminals broke the window of the van and threw Hannah's body inside the van. Now, because they was drunk, to trap me, those criminals forced me to rip Hannah, and they may even force to kill her. Even in court, Haslewood Foods Company supervisor James Dennis testified, but Maninder said, I borrowed 16,000 euros from James, and he is also under the misconception that I am having an affair with his wife. That's why James is targeting me. Maninder also said, maybe James hired those 3 men to frame me and forced me to commit this crime on the night of March 14th. But in the end, when the police investigated Maninder Pal's all statements, it all turned out to be lies. And finally, on November 25, 2008, all the allegations against Maninder Pal were proven. After that, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Now he will be imprisoned without parole for at least 24 years. At the time of sentencing, he was 41 years old, and he will remain in jail until 2030. Of the 5 million rupees reward offered for catching Maninder Pal, 367,000 rupees were given to the taxi driver who first informed the police about Maninder Pal. With this, the money was divided among 12 other people because besides the taxi driver Jason Lepcha, those people also played an important role in solving this case. However, Jason used that money to buy land and then established a school for disadvantaged children on it, named the Hannah Memorial Academy in Foster's memory. Then, in 2006, when Hannah's parents visited Darjeeling and learned about this, they were very pleased. When these people returned to England, Hannah's parents started a registered charity to help Jason along with other people. This now greatly helps Jason Lepcha's school. So friends, this was the complete story of the Hannah Foster murder case.